We stand united in solidarity with Palestinians. Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Solidarity!
Wake up! Wake up, my dear. Please, I beg you, wake up. These are the words of Rahaf Hassan's father as he cradles his lifeless daughter's body, no older than 10, murdered by Israeli forces earlier this week. As the death toll rises in Palestine, we need to understand why this is happening. The recent events, the anger, the rage you've seen from the Palestinian brothers and sisters have been merely overdue symptoms of an illness far greater than a mere stabbing attempt. The people of Palestine have been subject to a disease that has poisoned not only Palestine and its holy lands, but the entire region. The disease is the Israeli occupation, a tumor that needs to be ripped out of the region for an everlasting cure of peace. For 67 years, the Palestinians have repeatedly suffered. Their lands stolen, their homes, schools, hospitals destroyed, and their families murdered, exiled, tortured, injured, or killed. They said that the old would die and the young would forget, but they will never forget. I, a young British Palestinian, will never forget, and we will never forget.
And let me say, first of all, we must not let the consequences of Israeli aggression and state terrorism be the division of people here in Britain. We must unite against Islamophobia, against anti-Semitism, against anything that seeks to divide the movement of solidarity with the Palestinian people. And we also have to send a clear message to David Cameron and his government. You cannot continue supporting Israeli aggression, Israeli state terror. You should drop your efforts to criminalise the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign, the latest proposals you're bringing forward, and understand this: nothing will stop our solidarity with the Palestinian people. Whatever laws you pass, we will continue to boycott, we will continue to take people's sanctions against Israeli aggression. And while you're at it, David Cameron, understand that we all know that the biggest traitor in the Middle East to the Palestinian people is the Egyptian dictator al-Sisi. Drop your invitation to him to visit, and if al-Sisi does visit, make sure he gets the message of real Palestinian solidarity on the streets of Britain.
Thank you. I'm very proud to stand here as a Jew, as a representative of a Jewish organisation which says it's not anti-Semitic to criticise Israel, which together with Jewish organisations in the United States, in Canada, in South Africa, Australia and widely across Europe, from the depths of our souls abhor what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. Its racism, its litany of crimes against humanity, from 20 Deir Yassins and Sabra and Shatila and Jenin and Carsled and Pillars of Defence and Prava and Brothers Keeper and Protective Edge. And morally, where was the Board of Deputies of British Jews during the apocalypse last summer? I'll tell you, proclaiming support for the rain of phosphorus and cluster bombs and missiles onto schools and hospitals and clinics and homes, which killed 2,300 people, 530 of them children, and inflicted life-changing injuries on tens of thousands. Where were they when we called on them to demand the murderers who burnt to death Ali Darabash be brought to justice? resoundingly silent. I've spoken last night with friends in Jerusalem. The mayor there is proclaiming, "We are the Lord of the land." There are waves of lynch mobs roaming the streets. The Israeli forces have suspended their rules of combat to allow snipers to shoot children, and ruled that their bodies will not be returned to their families but buried anonymously. Every time I think Israel has sunk to the absolute depth, they find a new abyss in which to sink. And from the depths of our being, proclaiming anger and sorrow, loud and clear, "Israel, you do not speak for us, not in our name. Never shall these crimes be in our name, because we're deeply and implacably committed to human rights, to freedom and to justice for Palestinians. End the arms trade with Israel. Stop the killing, all killing. End the occupation. End the occupation to stop the killings. Justice for the Palestinians."
And I'm very pleased to be here to condemn the British government, which does everything it can to support Israel and does nothing to support the rights of the Palestinians. I would also like to condemn the BBC in particular, which never tells you the background to killings. It never tells you why violence happens. It never tells you any of those things. It just reports them as if there is no history to this. But we know there is a history. It's 100 years since Sykes-Picot, when the British and the French colonial powers carved up the Middle East in their interests. It's nearly 70 years since the State of Israel was declared as part of the post-war settlement, again with the agreement of the imperialists. So there is a history of partition and occupation. There is a history of violence. There is a history that the Palestinians know only too well. Because when our government talks about going to war, it always says there is an existential threat that we need to be aware of. The Palestinians have a much greater existential threat than practically any other place in the world. With the right-wing Netanyahu government, with illegal settlements growing by the day, with the violence of the settlers, they are trying to wipe out the Palestinians. They are trying to pretend that Palestine doesn't exist. And we are here to say we are going to stop them from doing that. They are not going to destroy Palestine. They are not going to do any of those things.
The British government, the coalition 5 years ago, changed the law in Britain, changed the law to allow Israeli politicians, war criminals, to walk free in our country here. And that was shameful, because they changed the law just for Israel, not because it was a good law. And they're now doing the same thing again. They are going to legislate to stop councils from boycotting companies that are complicit in the occupation. Again, not because it's a good thing, but because it's for Israel. Well, whose side are you on? Is it the side of the illegal occupier, or is it the side of the victims who have suffered for far too long? The freedom of the Palestinians will come, and when we do, the British government will look at itself in the mirror in shame.
I stand today as a representative of the Egyptian Revolutionary Council, and I come with one message, the message of the free people of Egypt, to say that the regime in Egypt does not represent us. The Sisi regime, the tyrannical regime in Egypt, does not represent the Egyptian people. We send salutations to the heroes and heroines of Palestine who every day sacrifice, who have to endure nation, who have to endure the terrorist state that kills, that tortures, that imprisons the innocent for the sole right that they seek, the right to self-determination. Palestine remains occupied. Every inch of Palestine today is occupied, and it will be free. And in that struggle, the Egyptian people will stand by you. Sisi is complicit in the crimes of Netanyahu. Sisi is responsible with Netanyahu in the killing of Gazan children. Let us be clear. These people are partners in crime. Netanyahu was welcomed in the UK. Sisi will be welcomed here by Cameron in a number of weeks. Let us raise our voices in saying we will not welcome crimes against humanity and criminals against humanity on this land.
And there is no equivalence between the violence of an occupied people and the violence of those who overwhelmingly, with superior force, occupy them. That's why when I was young, on the television, in dramas, we thrilled to the actions of the French resistance, of the partisans in Italy and Yugoslavia, because we recognized that when a people is violently, illegally occupied for decades in this case, and there is no other way to throw off, shake off that occupation, then the people have every legal and moral right to fight, and that's what they're doing now. And we have one choice. Are we with the European colonial settler state represented by that embassy there, or are we with their victims? Hamas said earlier in his speech that he was a Palestinian. All over the world this day, on social media, on the streets of capitals and other cities, we are saying in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. One last point. Every major party in this country has a Friends of Israel. Conservative Friends of Israel, unbelievably a Labour Friends of Israel. Why does Israel have any friends in the Labour Party, let alone hundreds who will chink glasses at their ritzy receptions at conference time? We have to create a situation in this country where people would be ashamed to be photographed at a Friends of Israel soiree. That's what we did in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, and that's what we must do in the struggle against apartheid in Palestine. Lastly, they say in their lack of context that somehow this intifada stands in the way of a negotiated solution to this ancient conflict. In fact, it's long past time for negotiation. Negotiation between one party, which holds all the weapons and has the support of almost every government in the world, and another party which has only faith, themselves and us on their side. This balance of power has to be changed. There's only one solution, and that is one democratic state from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Palestine will be free. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you.
All right, let me hear the loud Palestine, soon to be Free Palestine! I don't know if some of you saw it, but there was a pathetic article by some Israeli in The Guardian yesterday that said Palestinians have for decades taught their children to be murderers. As a Palestinian woman, I want to say we have taught our children resistance and courage and resilience.
Don't show your film if you can't stand there.
We have taught them how to fight for justice, not just for the Palestinians, but for justice around the world. And thank you for coming out to show that to the whole world today. There are 70 demonstrations happening around the world. The Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions National Committee, who I'm speaking on behalf today, representing 170 Palestinian civil society organizations, issued a call for a wave of solidarity around the world. And to be honest, at the beginning I was really afraid. I was afraid that now are so used to thousands of Palestinians dying before they go out on the streets. So it's so heartening to see all of you today, to be telling the world that we don't need an all-out military assault like Gaza, but we are standing with Jerusalem, we are standing with Ramallah, and we are standing with Haifa too! And a lot of us are angry, and I know that it's legitimate anger. Trust me, I have seen my father throw his shoe at the television more than any of you since I was a child. But I also know that we now have the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, and we all need to act. It's not enough to be angry, especially here in this country. I'm not even going to go into the history of the Balfour Declaration or British colonialism, but the current British government has an open arms trade with Israel. Arms going back and forth. These are arms that are tested on the bodies of Palestinians that your tax money is going into. The company G4S is a British company. There have been 780, more than 780 arrests in Palestine. The equipment inside those Israeli prisons is G4S equipment. This is your company, people. Their headquarters are here down the street. If we don't stop these companies from profiting off of the blood of Palestinians, no one else is going to stop them. So please take your anger and join the organizing. Join the beautiful organizations that have put this day together, and let's campaign in solidarity. Freedom, freedom, and boycott Israel!
And we are here to say that we are not going away. We shall remain here protesting, and we will stay here until Palestine is free. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
It is not enough to keep taking to the streets every time there's news of escalating attacks. Our efforts must be consistent. Support the movement to end this. Support BDS. Fight all supremacist oppressive structures. And finally, we stand uncompromisingly in support of the emancipation of the Palestinian people and solidarity to the resistance